My trip to India was in 1965. The aid mission was reviewing an early draft of the new 5-year plan for India, for India's development. And they wanted someone to look at the agricultural part of the plan and evaluate it, critique it. Orville Freeman decided that I should be the one to do that. So I arrived in the fall of 1965, 31 years old, and almost immediately I began to see signs that India might be in trouble on the food front. I read several newspapers each morning, the Hindu, Indian Express, Times of India, and I'd go through them quickly. And what I noticed was that they were reporting signs of drought. Now, India always has some drought and some flooding and so forth, but the drought was reports coming from many, many places in India indicating there are going to be crop shortfalls. So I began collecting these articles and clips and playing around with numbers. And within a few days, it became clear to me that they were in trouble. I put together a short cable because if my assessment was right, we were going to have to move very fast to get grain to India. I began playing with numbers and concluded that it could be as much as 12 million tons. That would be easily a fifth of the U.S. wheat harvest, so it wasn't a trivial amount. Freeman had shared my cable with LBJ. What LBJ saw was an opportunity to reform Indian agriculture. This is an extraordinary piece of thinking on his part. So anyhow, we put together this very simple agreement, which said basically in exchange for continuing food assistance from the United States, India agrees to 1, reform its price policy, 2, move the fertilizer industry out of government and into the private sector, and so forth. I was given the assignment of going to New Delhi, convening a meeting with Chester Bowles, our ambassador, and John Lewis, head of the aid mission, to explain to them what their responsibilities were. And this was, I mean, I was 31 years old, just a few years off the farm, and here I am explaining to these guys what they have to do. Then I had to wait to get to see if Prime Minister Shastri would sign it on behalf of India. And that took some selling on Subramaniam's part, the Indian Minister of Agriculture. And he could not say to them, this is what the Americans want us to do. So he presented his new plan for Indian agriculture. And he used the occasion of the monsoon failure, saying we're in a very vulnerable situation as a society. We've got to get our act together, and this is what we need to do in agriculture. So he got it through and got it signed by Shastri. The logistics of it were extraordinarily challenging. How could we get so much grain into India? The previous limit had been 4 million tons a year. They didn't have a lot of port capacity, but we had leased the Manhattan, which at that time was the largest supertanker afloat, from Esso, now Exxon, and anchored it in the Bay of Bengal. It was eastern India where most of the famine was concentrated. They anchored it there and used it as a port. So incoming U.S. ships would unload grain onto the Manhattan, and Indian, much smaller boats that could go up the Ganges and up the tributaries would offload on the other side. In the end, we got 12 million tons of grain into India, the amount that was needed to avoid famine.